Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of your favorite show out there, Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here.
How do we manage this? People have said you need to smile more. How do I smile with all the junk that's going on right now?
People say you need... Mike, what are you
Basketball
doing?
team was terrible again.
Mike, you look like the Joker there.
Yeah.
Never do that again on this
Okay.
show. I mean, I don't agree with the people that say you need to smile more because...
Okay, we'll take this normal approch.
Well, there's nothing to smile about right now. Maybe baseball season. I
Okay.
mean, maybe we're looking
Okay.
ahead. Maybe gymnastics.
Yeah.
There's something to smile about.
Might be the best gymnastics team ever.
There you go. Do we have any gymnastics questions this week?
Yes.
Great. I love it. Let's get right into those questions then, shall we? Our first question is from Boiling Mad Hog, who is probably not smiling right now since his name is Boiling Mad Hog. How am I supposed to deal with another month of this awful basketball team? They give no effort, and they apparently can't explain why. This is torture.
Okay, so how do you deal with it? Well, baseball actually starts practice this week.
No way.
The problem now, if we had normal, sort of decent January weather, which we don't, you could actually go over there and watch these guys work out if you've got some time in the afternoon. That's what I love about baseball, especially in fall ball. They're the only sport that I know of that you can just walk in there and watch them practice. Everybody else keeps you out.
Yes.
Dave Van Horn says, yeah, we don't have anything to hide. Come in here and watch what we do. And if it were warmer, you'd be able to do that. So if it warms up sometimes before the season starts, you can go over there in the afternoon and watch them work out. It will probably be indoors this week when they start because it's so cold, and you can't go in the indoor because it's too small. But it's only a little over 3 weeks till the season starts. Now, here's the problem. And I don't know if you're like me on this, but now, when I think about where this basketball team was preseason, 11th, 12th, with the number 5 portal class, and everybody was saying this could be a Final Four team. There's never been a team that had this much hype in the preseason that ended up where it's at. Because they've gone from preseason maybe a Final Four team to, as we sit here right now, they're not an NIT team. Their numbers are like 117.
They're in the net rankings. They are really struggling.
Like 116.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 65, 66 NCAA teams because they have the play-in game. So it's 64 plus 2 more.
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
And then you add 32 NIT teams. That's not even 100. So if you're not one of the...
Oh, I see where your math is.
If you're not even in the top 100, you're not an NIT team, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So you go from one extreme to the other. I've never seen that before. But it scares me a little bit with baseball because they're pretty much 2 or 3 right now.
In like every major outlet.
You can go from one to the other. They're all in the top 5 and usually 2 or 3. So you're going, oh, I hope they don't turn out to be a bust. I hope this pitching staff is what it's supposed to be. I hope they can hit. I hope their defense is good. And so until they probably, you go through the first weekend, and I think they may play 4 games to start with, something like that. And then they go to Texas, to Arlington, and that's always the big test. So until we get through that and see, yeah, they're pretty good, be a little bit nervous. So, you know, it's just the hangover from football, which I thought might win 8 games to 4, and now the basketball, and now this, you're getting a little bit nervous about that. But the bottom line is, if it bothers you as much as it bothers Boiling Hog Mad, I think you just got to not watch the basketball games, right? You just got, look, there are things you can do. I watched an old movie. It was an old Alfred Hitchcock movie that I'd never seen before about this guy that claimed that this lady murdered her husband and then blamed him. But then it turned out at the end he did it. And it was just a total shock at the end. It was a great movie.
An Alfred Hitchcock movie?
Yeah,
wow, I want to know which one you're talking about.
It was from the 40s, and I just watched it, and I went, wow, because it turned out so different. So that gets you away from some of this stuff. Find out what you like, and just do that for at least 3 weeks, and then you'll be okay.
I find that I pass the time with some basketball movies just to bring my hopes up, you know, like a good Hoosiers, a good feel-good.
We're going to bring that up here.
No way. I haven't even looked at this, and you're going to bring that up. Man, I'm going ahead of us here. But, Mike, you're right. I think you have to focus and be cautious. Cautious going into baseball season because it doesn't make me feel good either.
Well, And also, if you just expect the basketball team to be bad, maybe they'll surprise you. Maybe they'll only be sort of bad.
Yeah, maybe they'll get some wins here and there, and then
just
they'll
be sort of
surprise
bad.
you.
They won't. They'll lose, but they'll lose by 6 instead of 12 or 14.
You know what scares me a little bit, Mike, with the reservation of baseball being ranked high going into the season? It's also like years past, Dave Van Horn has had to deal with injuries. And we got that news about Hunter Dietz, that freshman southpaw.
But that's always going to be the case with pitchers.
I know, but it gets me so nervous because I'm going, man.
The good news is they have such a lineup of pitchers, it's unbelievable.
They do, yeah.
They can afford an injury or two there.
Let's pray. Let's hope. Moving on, Lanny wants to know, why isn't Musselman getting through to these guys? In the past, the players are starting to come around by now due to his coaching. I think these players are getting worse.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories about that. You were telling me about somebody you talked to who said they had talked to one of the assistant coaches, didn't name the coach, who said that they'd never been around a group of athletes that were more uncoachable than this group. They just, whatever they're teaching them in practice, they just don't take it to the game. Now, the issue is why? Why is that happening? And I have my own theory about that, and I admit I'm reading something into this that may not be there. But after the game, one of these quotes, Musselman said something to the effect of, we are going to have to help these players learn to do what they need to do. Help is not a word Musselman uses. I don't ever remember him using the term help. He's not a helper. He doesn't view himself as a helper. I'm going to help you. He's more of, I'm going to teach you and you're going to learn, or I'm going to kick you in the rear end and you will sit on the bench.
Yeah.
He's a guy, honestly, that in practice slams the ball off the side of the gym, screams at people, screams even at his coaches sometimes. Before he ever arrived here, after he'd been hired, we talked to one of the guys that covered them at Nevada. And I'll never forget this. He said, Arkansas's players had better buckle up because this guy does not mess around. He is very, very, very demanding. And he's been that way, and we know he is. And always before, when he's gotten these players to come in here, they've adjusted to that. And that's pretty much all I ever knew. You know, this is going back 60 years, but when I was in junior high, high school, whatever, and I didn't even play basketball, but I heard stories, the coaches were pretty much like that.
Yeah.
I remember having a 7th grade coach, the meanest guy I've ever been around in my life. He was just scared the fool out of us. But we were pretty good. We didn't like him, and we weren't smart enough at that point to equate his meanness with why we were winning games until the next year when we got a nice coach. The mean coach left. The nice coach came in, and he would explain everything to you. Gee, Mike, you might not better do this. Try doing this. And everybody liked him until we started losing games, and we lost every game. We didn't win a game.
Yeah.
So you sort of learn lessons about that. Here's what I would say about athletics. It's just not politically correct. It's just not. By its very nature, you're being mean to people. When you play another team, you're being mean to them because you're beating them. You're not helping them. You're not going, yeah, we're pretty good, but we're going to help you be better too. You don't do that. You're just trying to whoop them. And so sports is that way. And if you don't want to be a part of that, don't be in athletics. So it's sort of understandable that that's the way you coach. So I've got a theory that these guys don't like to be, at least some of them, not all of them, don't like to be coached that way. And we know of a couple that we've been told that definitely don't respond to that and have said, you can't talk to me that way. I don't like this. So what if Muss, for this one group of guys, is at the end of his rope and says, you know what, I guess I'm just going to have to be nice to these guys. Gee, I will help you learn that you've got to play defense. And here's what you do. Here's how you fight through a screen. And you communicate with the guy over here. You may have to switch off. You don't just let each other. There were stories that were told by fans who were close to the court that these South Carolina guys were laughing at how easy it was to score.
Yeah, our Jacob Morris actually posted a tweet about that. He said he heard overheard them saying how easy it was to penetrate and how easy it was that they were just playing iso ball. This is easy. It's just iso ball.
And you have to understand that going into that game, South Carolina was one of the lowest scoring teams, and they and A&M.
I don't think they're very good. I'm sorry, and I hope there's no Gamecock fans.
They were good in certain areas, but they weren't a high-scoring team.
No, and I think that was a game that Arkansas definitely could win. It was a winnable game on the schedule. And I just thought they bullied them all afternoon long.
That supposedly is the word. We mentioned it last week. If you want to beat Arkansas, hit them in the mouth because they don't respond.
Well, they were bullied.
So I don't know if you're suddenly nice to these guys, it will help playing into what they do. I don't know. But I don't know what else he can do. I will say this. If they're not coachable, what do? You get new guys next year. That's what you do.
Yeah, you get a different group of them. I think you're right, though. Sometimes you have to adapt your coaching a little bit. And the other thing that you mentioned him saying, I'm trying to help these players, which was something I heard too. But something else, he was so mild-mannered in that press conference. And he put a lot of
They may have broken him.
I might have. I mean, he took a lot of accountability, I thought. There was a lot of people on social media, we brought it up last week on the show, where it's like, why isn't he taking accountability?
This week he did.
This past week he did. He said, we as a coaching staff need to do better. We as a coaching staff need to help these guys out. And so, again, I
We'll
think
see if
maybe
it works. Nothing else has worked, but we'll see.
Eddie Lynn says, stop blaming the new guys on the team. Devo and Brazil are supposed to be leaders. Instead, they're setting a bad example for the transfers.
Yeah, Eddie Lynn's a friend of mine. We talked about this off, like on the phone, and I just don't agree with him. I think when you are around players with bad habits every day and on the court with them, it eventually wears off on you. You don't wear off on them. We've seen that the coaching staff hasn't had any impact with these guys. I don't know how you could expect a couple of guys on the team to do it. So I think rather than blame them, I think this is a good example of what happens when you bring a group of guys in that aren't buying in. It actually drags down the guys that were here before and were playing better but are going backwards.
Yeah, the attitude of other players drips into the locker room. It affects everything. It's like a cancer. And other coaches have talked about that. When you have one or two bad attitudes, you can't isolate them. The whole locker room is affected. It starts spreading. We talk about my dad on the show a lot because he has been a coach for a very long time.
Why do you talk about your dad all the time? Do you not have any ideas of your own?
I do have ideas. We got a funny comment last week about why do I talk about my dad? Well, he's been a college basketball coach for a long time. He's been a basketball coach for a very long time. But he has a saying, AIE. Right? And it's in their locker room, and its attitude is everything. And the reason why he says that is because it starts with your attitude, and if you have a positive attitude, that will spread to the coaching staff, to the other players, and that can help you win games. If you have a bad attitude, one bad attitude,
same thing. Spreads.
It spreads, exactly. Texarkana Bob says, I'm no expert on the X's and O's of basketball, but it seemed like almost every possession Saturday was one pass and a shot, or no pass at all and a shot. What's up with that? Coach Norman Dale must be rolling over in his grave.
See, he doesn't realize that, but he just, how Musselman likes to have the little weird examples. He goes into the locker room.
We used to go in dressed up as
dressed
things.
Up and says weird people. Here's what he needs to do. Bring them in there before practice early and show them Hoosiers.
Yes.
Let them see Norman Dale. He's the ultimate old school guy.
I love it.
Because Norman Dale proved in that movie what old school does, right? He fought that whole community. They were all into what they were doing.
He backed up the team, and that's what I loved.
And then they got
about
Jim, but the problem is you don't have a Jimmy Chitwood on this team, which was actually the real guy was Bobby Plump. Because it's a real story.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think the guy's name was Norman Dale either, the coach. But the point is, he was old school, and they didn't listen to him for the longest time. But when they finally started winning, the way they came around was they started to realize that what Norman Dale was asking them to do was what you had to do. So show it to them. They might see it on, if you see it in the movie, you might start to believe it.
I like it. I mean, that is one of the movies.
Maybe you should just bring Gene Hackman into the locker room. Call him up. Hey, can you come help our basketball team? We need you to come in as Norman Dale.
I think it might help. I think at least showing them the movie, maybe Musselman dressing up like that one day, walking into the locker room, giving a great speech. I think I think it could energize these guys. I love that you put that Texarkana Bob put that in the question. MB Hog says lots of discussion on Hogville about Devo's flagrant 2 kicking foul. I saw it more as bad timing and an unfortunate unintentional connection. It certainly didn't seem worthy of an ejection from the game. What do you think?
I think we both agree that it was probably a flagrant 1, but not a 2. The 2 gets you kicked out of the game.
Absolutely.
We thought that was excessive. I just thought he went up and maybe he was kind of using his leg to kind of put some
like just a space, yeah.
Yeah, to create space. I don't think he was trying to kick somebody and hurt them. You know, there's been every year there's an emphasis in the off season. Refs get together in the conference and we're going to do this year. I think there was an emphasis in between seasons of we're going to start doing the flagrant 1, flagrant 2 thing more closely. Because every time I turn around, somebody's getting a flagrant 1 or a flagrant 2.
I've noticed that as well.
And I think it's excessive. Yeah. I mean, there was one the other day where their arms got tangled up and then they called it hooking. And so then you get a technical, and so you get to shoot free throws and get the ball back. You know, why are we doing this in the off season? Why do people... Who are these bozos that in the offseason assume basketball is messed up and we're going to fix it by doing some re-emphasis of some rule?
They always try and do that. I mean, it feels like every offseason they're going in as a group, like you said, and trying to, okay, well, we didn't call enough of this last year and we didn't do this, or maybe people are getting hurt. It's one of those things where it's like, just let him play.
If you ask the average fan, they're going to say we want less, not more.
Oh, absolutely.
Stop this stuff.
Absolutely. I don't think it's always the refs. Like, I'm sure it's the collective that's making it happen rather than certain refs are going, well, I'm sure there are refs out there that are like, I don't really want to call that much.
I think it's Greg Sankey. I think he's
Greg Sankey.
You ever watch Seinfeld?
Yes, I love Seinfeld.
And they got Steinbrenner, and you only see him on the phone from behind. I think Greg Sankey's in there going, hey, we got to do it. I'm calling. Give me the head of the refs. We're gonna. I'm just going to blame it on him. You always blame the guy at the top.
I feel like you always blame Greg Sankey for everything. If it's like a small inconvenience for you, you're like, it's Greg Sankey.
He's better than Sleepy Slive.
I know,
Rest in
yes.
peace. Sleepy Slive's not around anymore. But he's still the guy at the top, and there's things that go wrong, and it's his fault.
Okay, all right. It's Greg Sankey's fault. You heard it here first, everyone. To football, where Amon Abbey says Pittman keeps adding mid-major and D2 players out of the portal. The Aggies and Ole Miss are ranked 1 to 2 by loading up on transfers from schools like Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, and LSU. That won't cut it.
Yeah, here's the thing. The reason Ole Miss is up there is I think they've got more overall transfers, and then they've got like something, the last time I checked, they had like 9 4-stars that they had gotten out of the portal, and Arkansas had like 4. So that's 5 more 4-stars. And so a lot of it is a numbers game. Here's the problem, just like we talked about with Arkansas's portal class in basketball. The people that do these rankings can get it wrong. You're relying on a bunch of yo-yos like me that are media people that have decided, hey, we're going to do the rankings. And who did they get certified to do rankings? Is there a test you take?
I think it's like a mathematical equation where you put in the number of 4-stars and 5-stars and things like that.
Come on, do you get certified as a portal ranker?
No.
I am a certified ranker of portal classes. I mean, there's no way. You just say that that's what you are.
Right.
You're a website, and you say, because I started looking at a bunch of them, and they're all over the place. Arkansas was 24th in one and 11th in the other. Come on, that ought to tell you how subjective this is.
Yeah, well, it's subjective, the star process,
I'm not telling you not to get a little bit concerned with what Ole Miss has done, but they've also got more NIL money. They went in and got Lane Kiffin, after complaining all last season about NIL money and how Ole Miss didn't have much of it, he went out and convinced their fans to start sending in money. And they've now suddenly got a bunch of NIL money, and yeah, money talks. So, but what I'm telling you is, let's wait and see, because A&M did that 2 years ago. Everybody's talking about their recruiting class.
I remember.
And it just went.
Yeah.
So we'll see if Ole Miss is as good. Here's the problem. I've talked about it before. From day one, from all the way back in December, what have we heard about Ole Miss? Everywhere you look, Ole Miss they're going to win it all. They've got them winning the SEC, being in the playoffs, winning the national championship with all their portal classes and all this stuff. That is the worst case of rat poison you will ever have in your life. Now, if they survive it, I'll be the first one to say, okay, Lane Kiffin knew what he was doing. But we're way ahead of ourselves on that. So to get worried about comparing Arkansas's portal class to their portal class,
And
Arkansas's quarterback that they brought in is a 3-star.
yeah.
Okay, nobody's looking at him. I've seen the list of portal transfer quarterbacks. He's not on it. But everybody tells me that knows what's going on over there that Bobby Petrino personally picked this guy out, looked at him, knew about him, said, we got to get that guy. He's my quarterback. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, well, he was listed on some websites as a top quarterback in the portal. He was listed. Because I did see that.
I looked at one this week. He was not even in the top 10.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, before he was gotten by Arkansas, I think that it's all subjective. You've also noted, because I've talked to Otis Kirk about this with the stars. Sometimes when people commit to Arkansas, they drop them a star, which is crazy. That's so subjective. Like, you're not just ranking them based on talent. Now you're ranking them because, oh, okay, they might have committed to Arkansas, so they're gonna drop a star.
So Armand Abbey, cool it. Stop worrying about it. It's too early to worry. We'll be here along with the rest of the media in the spring to kind of look at some of these guys, but I'll be the first to tell you this spring, it's going to be the fall when you're going up against real teams before you're going to know for sure what this portal class has added. Because more than any other team I can think of, Sam Pittman needs to reinvent his team from last year. They got to go in, keep the guys that had the right attitude, but add new guys that have, and get rid of that we don't care if we win or lose bunch.
And to say something else in his question about, oh, we're adding mid-major and D2 players. You guys don't like Andrew Armstrong? Like, I mean, here's the thing.
He was a pretty good receiver last year.
Yeah, he was ranked sneakily in the top 10 of receivers in the SEC. Sneakily, right? And so
here's my prediction.
Okay.
Bobby Petrino is going to get Isaac Tesla open.
I love it.
You're going to see him open in ways you never saw because that's what he does. Through his offense, he gets guys wide open. That's what I remember from when he was here before.
So those are two guys that came from mid-majors, like Armand Abbey was saying. So I think there's something to be said about don't hate on those guys because there could be some real talent there that just because some of these other programs, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, whatever, are going out and getting guys that have transferred from major programs, doesn't mean the mid-major and D2 guys don't have talent.
What did we keep hearing about Satania all along until now, until we finally get into the school has started? We kept hearing he was transferring. He was going to go, and he didn't. Why didn't he leave? Because he realizes that the whole wide receiver room is about to change because of the guy that's the offensive coordinator?
I think you're on to something there. I think you're on to something. I can't wait to see what happens in spring, that's for sure. Mousetown says the SEC East and West goes away next season with the addition of Texas and OU. Who makes the SEC championship game? I say Georgia and Ole Miss.
Yeah, it says, I don't know how that got on the screen that way, but it is Ole Miss.
What'd you put?
It says Texas on there, but it's Ole Miss. It just got translated wrong because I called him up and he
said Ole Miss.
I reconfirmed it. So he's saying Ole Miss.
Okay.
Here's what I'd say about that. What I just said about rat poison. This is why I won't pick Ole Miss to be in the SEC championship game. I've seen it happen at Arkansas too many times. When you sit around and talk about we're going to win it all, you don't. The only schools that can do that are Alabama and Georgia. They're impervious to that. The rest of these schools, you can't do that. Their players hear it every day, and then it does not happen.
Well, we saw what happened with Texas A&M.
I'm going to pick Georgia, and I was thinking about Alabama, but they are losing a lot of guys. I still think they've got the right coach, and I think he will reload eventually. But they may have an off year before they get back in going. So I'm going to go with LSU. I still think he's got it there. I think they've got something going.
Ooh, I'm going to clip this. I'm going to play it on the show.
Guess. It's a guess.
If it happens or it doesn't happen.
But I'm going to go with LSU makes it.
That is a bold prediction.
Because, again, this year there's no East and West.
Yeah.
So it's just your final conference record. And I'm going to go with Georgia and LSU. We'll see if it works out.
Ooh,
it's not Ole Miss.
I am pulling this clip immediately after the show and saving it into my special folder to bring it up if you're right or if you're wrong, Mike. As Giles says, I'm excited about the new CFB CFB playoff format this year. I am too, Giles. 12 teams. It's about time. I see 6 SEC teams getting in, but who makes it?
6 is a little much.
That's a lot. That's
There's
half.
a lot of complaints about this 12-team playoff from fans of teams not in the SEC saying the reason they went with 12 is to get more in.
Yeah.
And I've seen some projections. Yeah, they're going to get at least half of them are going to be SEC. I don't think that will happen. I would say 4. That's my basic guess.
I could even see 5. I could see
maybe 5. It depends on how good all these teams are. But the point is, who makes it? Which 4 teams? If we go to 4, which 4 get in? So again, we're going to go with Georgia.
Well, you're going to clearly go with LSU
I'm going to go with LSU.
Well, you have to, yeah.
I'm going to go with Ole Miss. I think they'll get in.
I think so,
I just
too.
don't think they're going to be one of the top 2. And who's that other team?
I kind of want to say Alabama, but I don't know.
I'd go with Alabama. I just don't think they're going to drop as much as most people think.
That's what I
now,
think,
people
too.
are going to say, yeah, your prejudice against Missouri is showing. We got a Missouri fan in here. It works in here, right? I talk to him all the time.
Yeah, we do.
What he's worried about is their defense. They're loaded offensively coming back, but they got to make some big changes in their defense. And their defense was huge last year. So I'm going to back off a little bit on saying there would be the 4th team.
They would be. It's interchangeable between Alabama and Missouri for me. I think either of those.
I'm going to go with Bama.
You're going to go with Bama? Okay. All right.
So you can go with Missouri.
I'm going to go with Missouri, but I'm going to clip this, and if we're wrong, we're going to play it for you guys when that rolls around this time next year. Razor Boo says, with the word floating around that Quincy McAdoo will be taking a medical hardship, the question arises, who are the 1 or 2 Razorback athletes, any sport, that showed great promise, but their careers were cut short while on the Hill?
The only one I really remember is Raleigh Williams IV. I think he was under Bielema.
Yeah.
And if you remember in an Auburn game one year, I can't remember the exact, it was to one of the vertebrae in his neck.
Yes, you're right.
Might have had a cracked vertebra, I'm not sure. And people felt like that he might not come back from that. But he did come back the following spring, and he was going through spring football. And I was there at an indoor football, and they were scrimmaging. And he got hurt there again, and that was it. They told him, no, you have to give it up.
Well, he could have died,
I
right?
think he had his feet, he lost feeling, I think, as I remember, in his legs temporarily. It came back, but that was enough, and I think his parents were like, okay. That's the only one I remember. I'm sure there have been others, but he was a very promising running back that had to give up football, and thankfully it doesn't happen that much. But we also want to comment on this thing with Quincy.
Oh, yeah, we do, yeah.
Because even though this is an interesting thing, it appears to me, and I'm going to use the word appear, it appears to me that there's somebody inside the football program that is feeding the media and basically saying he's gone. We don't expect him back. We think he's going to get a bad report from the doctors, and we personally wouldn't want him back here playing with that injury because we would always fear that it would be worse. Whereas he's saying, and his mom is saying, I haven't even talked to the doctors yet. Don't rule me out.
Yeah. I mean, he was at the gym the other day working out.
Right. So if I had to guess, I'm going to say, because look, you can come back even though you do a medical hardship. You just can't come back to your original school.
Right, but that's the problem. I don't think Quincy, personally, again, I haven't spoken to Quincy, but my assumption from this situation, Quincy's an Arkansas boy.
He is.
He loves the Razorbacks.
But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they are probably going to pretty much direct him into doing this out of fear for what could happen to him. You have an obligation as a coaching staff to look at a situation and say, we don't want that. We don't want somebody on our team that if they got that injury, it could paralyze them. Mm-hmm. So we're uncomfortable with that. So they would push him in that direction, and then if he continues to recover and gets, a good report from his doctors next year or whatever, he could go to some other school.
Well, I think it really all hinges on what the doctors say, too. I mean, we've heard so many different things from so many different sources on the extent of his injuries. And I think it really, at this point, you got to listen to the doctors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was another source, and I will say this, when speaking to Otis Kirk, who was kind of looking into the story for us when that news broke, there was another source that refuted what the original source said, that said, no, he has not claimed he's taking a medical hardship, and he has not been to see any doctors. So right now, while he could turn around and say he is taking a medical hardship, he is not at this time.
Right.
And so they refuted what the original source said.
And that's where we stand on
so
it. He basically said, I haven't made that decision, but there's at least some indication that somebody inside that athletic department is feeding the media with the idea, we don't expect him back.
Exactly. T.L. Slayton wants to know, what was your reaction to Dre Green Law's great game against the Packers? I love this question. The former Purple Dog will go down as one of the best NFL players ever from the state of Arkansas.
What a story for this guy. I remember he was in these shelters, or maybe was in homes. From about age 11, he didn't have a family situation. And he was eventually taken in by one of his high school coaches, a defensive guy. I don't know, I got the guy's name here somewhere.
Okay.
I wrote it down. Maybe you can look on there and see.
Brian Early?
Yeah.
Is that who it is? Okay.
That was it.
Oh.
And he took him in, and then they eventually adopted him. He was a cornerback originally, and then I think he moved to safety and was very effective in high school. He was on the state championship team. Then he comes to Arkansas, and they make an outside linebacker out of him. And then he went into the NFL as a weak side linebacker. And what has always made him good at that position, I think, is because he was originally a D-back, he learned how to intercept passes, and he had the speed to do it. You got to have quickness and speed to get to passes and pick them off, but you also have the ability to catch the ball, because a lot of linebackers don't. They just bat it down and it's good.
No, he can catch it.
How many times have you seen somebody bat a pass down and the next play they throw a bomb, and if you'd have picked it off, that would have never happened. It's been really good to watch him do this. He was a 5th-round draft pick. I thought he might make it in the NFL, but at 5th round, you're thinking maybe he doesn't stick. I didn't know. And to look at his career now and what he's done with that, this kid's been an overachiever his whole life. He's a perfect example of somebody that had to overcome. It's what I talked about earlier when I talked about sports is not fair. It's unfair. There are things in life that aren't fair. His life was not fair. He didn't have a home, a family situation. He went from this shelter to that shelter to living with a family for a while and doing this and doing that until somebody finally took him in. And he overcame all of that. He didn't sit around and, woe is me, I'm messed up because of my background or any of that. He used it to overachieve, and he's done that ever since. And it is a perfect example of what I talk about with what athletics can give you as an individual. You don't have to become an NFL player. You don't have to become a star. I can give you names of guys that I grew up with that'll sit here and tell you today that they learned discipline, they learned how to handle situations in their job by what they went through as an athlete, the way they were treated by their coaches who told them, man up, don't use this as an excuse. So he's a perfect example of that. Nobody, I guarantee you, nobody said, hey, Dre, we'll help you out here. Just hang on there. I know you need help. He just overcame this stuff, even to the point where I'm thinking, is he really going to make it in the NFL as a linebacker? He's short, 5'11", 6 feet tall. NFL linebackers are usually bigger than that. Yeah. And yet there he is.
Yeah, I thought you would like as well when he was in the press conference, the 49ers press conference, they said, do you remember having the last time you had a 2-interception game? And he said, oh, yes, I do, in college, my senior year against Texas A&M. Do you remember that game, Mikey?
Yeah, it's awesome.
It was awesome, and I was like, that was so funny. I can't believe that was the last time.
Anytime you get 2 picks against the Aggies, you think that's not something I would remember?
I know you remember it. I was like, man, I know Mike Irwin remembers that game. It was a great story. And hey, I'd love to see him compete for a Super Bowl as well. We'll see, though. They go up against the Lions. I'm a little torn. I know Razorback fans, if you're not a fan of the 49ers and Lions, you might be torn too, because he's got to go up against some former Razorbacks on the Lions, too.
Yeah, I know.
So
that was another good story, too.
I know. Talk about good stories in the NFL right now. Great stories all over the place. So we'll see what happens with that. But that's a great story, Mike. I'm glad you got that question this week. Hog Redneck says, I was following a discussion on the internet last week about teams openly buying players before they even enter the portal. Ugh. Some guy indicated that we should stop crying about it and get with the program. Everybody is doing it. Why do so many fans think this is okay?
Here's my theory. There are fans out there whose team has never won a championship. And they think the way it can happen is the way the Aggies have always thought it can happen. You can eventually buy it. And they're not the ones that are going to have to buy it. Most of these people with that attitude are not boosters. They're not maybe even people that buy season tickets. They want somebody else to use their money to buy the team they like a championship. It's just not going to happen. I'm telling you, they're trying to make it happen, but we see all kinds of evidence. We talked about the Florida State thing. Now there's other teams under investigation.
Yeah, Florida.
Florida, and the word is Miami may be the next.
Someone's in Florida
and
stalking.
You're going to start seeing these teams get turned in for contacting a player that's not even in the portal and saying, look, there's no school in America that needs a good linebacker better than Arkansas does right now. Do you really believe that Sam Pittman's going to say, hey, let's sit down. Boy, there's a linebacker over here at this school. We really need him. Hey, Travis Williams, call this guy up and tell him we'll give him $1 million if he'll hit the portal and come here. He's not going to do that, but there are some schools that are doing that, and they're going to get caught, and this is eventually going to be dealt with. We were talking about this, how we think it's going to all play out, and it's a little bit about what I said last week, and the guy didn't understand what I was talking about. If you make these people employees, if you make athletes employees of the university, they'll be part-time employees. They can get extra money through these NIL collectives. Mm-hmm. And then the issue is, what about the individual NIL that you get? That's where the issue is. Because right now it's perfectly legal for you to get an agent and get your own deal. But is there any way to regulate these deals? I don't know. The issue is whether or not you're getting an actual NIL deal or some rich guy booster is just throwing you money. For instance, if I'm a quarterback, what value do I bring to a business? I'm an Aggie booster. I own a bunch of used car lots. And last year I paid some former Aggie coach $35,000 for a series of ads. But now we've got this quarterback we want. I'm going to pay him $1.5 million. There should be a red flag on that.
Well, I guess it's looking at the businesses and seeing that, okay, you think this guy is worth 1.5, because also, I mean, the agent can go out and say, oh, you want to offer him $500,000? No, he's worth 1.5, and tell you that's how much it's going to take for him to do your commercial. That's what agents do.
I know.
So maybe there's a case where.
How do you separate a legitimate thing where you as a business say, if I use this kid as a spokesman and pay him $1 million, he's going to bring us more than $1 million in benefits? In other words, our sales are going to go up by $3 million. How do you judge that from somebody just going, he's not going to help us that much, but this is just my way of throwing the guy some money so he'll play for my team?
Well, I think you look at tangible, you look at like actual tangible things. If I pay you, Mike Irwin, $1 million to advertise for my used car lot, I want to see you in a commercial. I want to see you posting on social media. I want to see you wearing a shirt that even says my name on it. I want to see you driving around in one of my cars. That are all tangible things that you can look at maybe and say, that's a legit deal.
It would be interesting to see if KJ Jefferson brought $1 million worth of publicity to the NIL that he got. And we don't know how much he got.
We don't know.
There were rumors $500,000, rumors $1 million. Nobody knew for sure. But did he generate that much in extra revenue for that company? I don't know.
Well, what about the athletes that do have NIL deals with radio stations, local radio stations, where they come on the radio station once a week? Does that actually help the viewership? Are their numbers better? You would have to really look into things. And then what's to say that you shouldn't be paying? If it's your money and you want to pay that athlete to do branding for you, you should be allowed to as a business. That's just you as a business
look at those
allowing.
Radio stations. They're not true boosters, so I wouldn't think they would be doing it if they didn't feel like they could get some benefit out of it.
Right, but I think the same thing about the used car lot people, or the people who, whoever the automotive person is that wants to give $1 million. If you only make $500,000 in sales because of KJ Jefferson, for example, that's up to you. I mean, that's the risk analysis you take from paying that person $1 million.
It's a question that's really difficult to resolve.
It's a very tough thing, which is why you have so many ADs, so many, who are going, what do we do? What's going? The NCAA isn't giving us any help. The government isn't giving us any help. What do we do?
I'm just telling you, you can't sustain this.
No.
If you're like this yo-yo on the internet that said get used to it because this is the way things are done, it cannot sustain itself. You cannot. If the minute it gets out that you can buy a championship, nobody's going to care anymore.
No.
If you're not that team that bought the championship, you're just going to be mad.
You're going to have to turn it into pro sports. If you
And
keep
in
going
pro sports, you can't buy a championship.
No, you're right. But you got to keep going down that path of, okay, you're going to be drafted. There's going to be a college draft.
What is the richest franchise in the NFL? The
the
Dallas Cowboys. They don't win squat.
You're right.
So
You're
in the NFL, money itself, because it's not allowed to do it, it has no effect on who you draft. It has no effect on your total cap. You have a salary cap.
Yeah.
So there are rules in place in the National Football League that keep you from buying championships.
But that's what needs to be implemented in college if you keep going down this path. You need a college draft. Unfortunately, that, to me, is the road we're heading down.
Well, that's a deal breaker, too, because all these people that are talking about athletes' rights, the minute you take a 5-star, #1 quarterback in the country and tell him he's going to South Alabama, no.
No, I mean, UConn's coach said it in the press conference the other day. Guys, it's just going, it's getting out of hand. It's getting out of hand that we are going down a path where I can't get certain players to buy in because they can just leave. They can just go and leave. Loyalty is no longer there.
You absolutely can't do that in the NFL.
Absolutely, exactly.
All these people that say, you just make it pro football. Well, the number one thing is there's no portal in pro football. You can't say, hey, we like this guy over here, this running back that they've got. Let's go grab him from this other team. You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do it unless the other team wants you to do it.
So, Mike, there you go. It's heading down a path where it's going to turn into something like the NFL.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Anyways, let's move on to the next question, which I love, WV Hog fan. Several of the women's teams have had fantastic seasons this year. The Gym Backs, there you go, Mike, off to their best start ever. Why do the women's teams not get the respect or the publicity that the men's teams get?
See, I think that's wrong. I think they do. I know they do here. We bring in athletes all the time and have them in the studio here and interview them. The gymnastics team had a couple of those girls.
Yeah, I sat down with Lauren and Serena from the gymnastics team. Yeah.
You look at the attendance for volleyball this year. I went to some of those playoff games. There was a lot of people in Old Barnhill. You look at who's been showing up for softball games lately. Soccer. Attendance is on the rise in those sports. They're getting more publicity, and it's not just from us. I see it across the board.
SEC Network started Friday Night Heights. What is that? Their specific gymnastics coverage. It's
Exactly.
brand new this season. Friday Night Heights. It's because people want to watch it.
So I don't think that's correct. I think they're getting a lot of publicity now.
I think obviously there is a point to be made that, hey, more is never a bad thing. More and more would be great. But they are definitely starting to get the respect they deserve.
And I am starting to see
up.
fans react to that.
Yeah, I am too. I saw you saw my tweet the other day.
Well, and then how about ESPN Plus? Because I could be sitting at home on a day off and then there's a gymnast. Now, I admit that I did this. I was watching football, but I switched over and started watching gymnastics, and I saw they were behind, and I went, they're going to get beat by Alabama on the road. They're going to lose. And I turned it off, and then they tied them. And I was mad at myself.
Why did you turn it off?
Because
the end
they were
was
behind,
good.
and I thought there's just no way. They're on the road. This is Alabama. It's just too much too soon. But by the same token, I was amazed when they ended up tying. And you went on the road and tied the number 3 team in the country.
I know.
That's why this gymnastics team probably is going to be the best ever at this school.
I hope so. You hear what Jordan Weber says. You hear what Lauren and Serena told me. There's just something different about that group of girls. There's just something different. I'm excited to see what they do the rest of the season. They have a meet against Auburn this Friday night, so we'll see what happens in that one. That I'm sure we'll be there, Mike, and we'll be seeing what they do. Marty Bird's Proxy says the final question of the show. Playing the Aggies last reminded me of G. Raleigh White Coliseum. It seemed on TV like an unusual gym. What were a couple of the worst gyms in the old SWC? Stories?
I used to call it G. Raleigh Whiz, and it was bad.
I read it as G. Raleigh Whiz. Isn't that bad?
Yeah, it's G. Raleigh White, but I called it G. Raleigh Whiz. It was on the campus. A&M had bad facilities in those days. And Rick Schaefer remembered this because I called him to talk about this. He remembered that they actually allowed Reveille, that barking collie, to go inside. They had him in the basketball gym, and he would bark all during the game.
In the
Yes,
gym?
the dog. And Eddie Sutton hated that. And one day, apparently, they came in on a Friday and they're going to play on a Saturday, so they were having to go into practice. And Eddie Sutton supposedly made the comment. He turned to one of his assistant coaches and says, I think I've come to the conclusion that they ought to allow the Aggies to cheat so they can get money and build a better gymnasium, because he hated that place. But that wasn't even close to the worst one. A&M had this, or Rice had this thing called Autry Court, except that it wasn't a court. It was a combo thing where they played basketball, but it was also a combination kind of music department facility and drama department facility. They had plays and musicals and concerts there.
With the basketball.
Well, what they would do is just drag out folding chairs and put them on the court and then let people sit there, and they had a stage on one end, and they'd open the curtains and they'd have people up there singing, or they'd have a drama, a play, or whatever. Okay. So it could be basketball, it could be for the drama department, it could be for the music department, it could be a concert. That place was pitiful. And it's interesting that Arkansas never seemed to play well in these dopey arenas. It was like Eddie Sutton was going, these things stink, and then it would wear off on the players. So that was a bad one. The absolute worst was this thing called Heart of Texas Coliseum, and it really wasn't a coliseum. It was a weird-looking thing, like a bigger version of Barnhill, kind of a barn-looking thing. And it was a basketball facility, but they had rodeos in there.
Where was it at? What
it's
school?
Baylor.
Oh, Baylor. Okay, sorry.
And they had indoor rodeos in there. And I've been in there before when you were sitting there and you kind of looked off behind the one end and you could see horse stalls in there and stalls for cattle and things like that. And you're going, what is this? And it was real dark in there too. Very, very dark. So that was a bad one. Then there was Daniel Meyer Coliseum, which was the same design as the Tad Pad, the old Tad Pad at Ole Miss. It's just this round thing, and it was so small, the way it was constructed, that the stands came right up to the edge of the court. And here was the problem. If you're a photographer, you're trying to shoot, you didn't have any leg room. And so what would happen is TCU had this SID that was like a Nazi. And during timeouts, he literally would come out from behind the press table and he'd walk along and he'd kick guys. Get back! Get those legs back.
TCU or Baylor?
No, this is TCU.
Oh, TCU, okay.
In Daniel Meyer Coliseum.
Oh, wow.
He would come back and kick these. Get your legs back. Kick, kick, kick. This guy was a real jerk. But there was also another jerk SID at Houston.
Okay.
And these guys would compete on who was the biggest jerk. Oh my God. Like the guy at Houston one time, I called to get credentials. I had applied for credentials the normal way and didn't get them. And I called this guy and complained because they were having the Southwest Conference outdoor track meet. And I had to be there. Arkansas was supposed to win it. He said, you can't come. And I said, why? And he said, I don't like you. I don't like your attitude. I'd had some arguments with him. I said, well, you can't keep me out because of that. And he said, you can't come. So I called Rick, the SID at Arkansas, and I said, if you don't help me, my next stop is to call the Southwest Conference office, because I know those people and they're not keeping me out. So Rick called for me, and then he called back and he said, you are going to get in. There's good news. You are going to get in. The bad news is this guy's going to chew you out when you get there. And I said, what? He said, yeah, you have to get chewed out and then you can get in. And I thought he was joking. So I go up to the gate, the media gate, and I said, hey, they've got my press pass waiting for me. He said, oh, yeah, I remember you. He calls this guy down from the press box. It takes him like 10 minutes for him to walk down there. And he comes out and starts chewing me out. Calls me, he says, I'm trying to go over his head, says it's childlike what I did. And I said, hey, we're not a bunch of kids in the neighborhood. If we were, I would just hit you in the face. But I'm not going to do that. So let's stop this stuff, you know. And he's like, no. You were rude to me. You overruled me. It was cheesy what you did. And I'm like, cheesy? I'll show you cheesy.
Oh, no.
And so we're about to get into it down there. But finally, he gave me my pass, so I went in and I shot.
Okay.
So I'm mad at this guy. I don't like the guy at TCU that's going around kicking people.
Kicking people, yeah.
But I got my revenge, and here's how. One year at the Southwest Conference indoor track meet,
oh, no.
the guy from TCU was up at the media door where people would come in with their pass and get in. The guy at Houston was down dealing with everything on the floor. So I'm sitting down there about an hour before the meet. There's nobody there. And I'm just sitting in a chair. The guy from TCU comes down and tells the guy, and he said, hey, there's this guy the photographer at the Dallas Morning News got sick just like 30 minutes ago, and he had to go to the hospital. So they sent another guy over here, but he doesn't have a press pass. The pass is in the name of the other guy. And he said, so you need to get him because they had extra press passes. You could write the name.
Yeah, you just write the name on.
He said, you need to give me one of those so I can take it up to him. And he said, I'm not going to. And he said, why? And he said, because they should have let us know earlier. And he said, they just knew. They just found out. There's nothing. I'm not letting them in. And he said, look, this is a track meet that we're trying to publicize.
Yeah.
Track's not exactly the biggest sport on the planet. And you're going to sit here and deny publicity from the biggest paper in this area, the Dallas Morning News, because of what? And he said, I'll do it myself. So he goes over and gets a press pass, and he writes the game down there. And the A&M guy, or the Houston guy, says to the TCU guy, he says his name, he said, don't give me any of your weak ASS BS, and he used the whole word BS.
Yeah.
Don't give me any of your weak ASS BS. He says, that won't fly with me. And they proceed to get into this huge argument, and I'm sitting back in my chair laughing because these two jerks are finally turning on each other. And it was the best time I'd had in months watching these two jerks go off on each other. They finally did it to themselves instead of us.
And so you were just sitting back and
It's like,
watching
who's the bigger jerk here, me or you? We're going to go after each other.
Mike, you've never told me that story, but
It was
that
so
is
funny.
hilarious.
I was laughing out loud. I'm surprised they didn't ban me. They were just so mad at each other, they didn't know that I was laughing at them. It was great.
You know, that was a great story, Mike. I hope that somehow that story gets back to them in a weird way. Are they still around?
They're probably gone by now.
Probably,
they were older than me, and I'm older than dirt. So.
Well, that's hilarious. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.